Can this menace that is cascading our society be defeated? Well, our next speaker is, based on everything I've read, is an absolute blue sky thinker and thinks that there is a chance. And maybe my reading of her profile will explain why I'm saying that. She is a passionate defender of human rights who has dedicated her life to fighting against societal harms that threaten the dignity of others. Her energy, creativity, and mobilization skills have revived the anti-pornography movement in the USA. As Executive Director of the National Center on Sexual Exploitation, the NCSE, she has developed a national strategy uniting conservative women's rights, child advocacy, and religious groups, including a bipartisan political leadership, to work together, raising awareness of the pandemic of harm from pornography. Her initiatives have led to sweeping changes in policy that foster exploitation for targets such as Google, Verizon, and the Department of Defense. Through her leadership, the NCSE has grown a network reaching hundreds of thousands of people all over the world. She has appeared on many national television programs in the USA, both local meaning of course state, and nationally, including CNN, Good Morning America, and Fox and Friends. She has regularly authored articles and speaks around the US addressing the harms of pornography and all forms of sexual exploitation and what can be done to curb the growing public health crisis resulting from pornography. It is our considerable pleasure to have with us at this event the Vice President and Executive Director for the National Center on Sexual Exploitation, Mrs. Dawn Hawkins. Please welcome her.
Thank you. It is so exciting to be with you. I am supposed to talk about how we're winning the war against pornography in America, but it's really how we're winning the war against pornography everywhere. There's so much happening right now. Just last year, the porn industry, they have a trade publication where they like to write about what we're doing, and sometimes I troll to see what their perspective is, and they had a whole article about how the tide is turning against them. And that was the headline. Like, even the porn industry is recognizing that we're getting organized and that we're having great successes and that they're starting to lose many significant fights. The National Center on Sexual Exploitation has been around for 54 years. We started, a Catholic priest in New York City started our organization when he saw that middle school age children were passing around Playboy on the playground. And he saw that this was going to cause tremendous harm to the youth, particularly in New York City. But almost immediately after he started this organization together with some other faith leaders in the community, they saw that it was a much bigger problem, and it was starting to affect all of America. The research wasn't quite there, but he was arguing that pornography would lead to the breakup of the marriage. He was arguing that it would increase other forms of sexual exploitation. And the organization that he went on to found, our organization, started to get involved in the legal battle against pornography and really led efforts in America with different presidencies in Congress and many of the state governments over the years. And we continue that. We have changed our name in those 54 years, but our mission remains the same. There's a different fight, though, today. Today, we don't have to go to battle just with arguing that it's a moral issue. And that's really how the fight against pornography has been waged for many, many years, about the spiritual harms of pornography. And pornography very much affects our spiritual lives, most definitely. It hinders our progress spiritually. But today there is so much research indicating many other types of harms that pornography is contributing to. And unfortunately today, almost every family has been touched by the harms of pornography. And if they haven't been touched yet, they're certainly worried if they have young children. And so it's not such a hard fight anymore to try to get people to our side, because now almost everyone recognizes that there is some element of harm associated with pornography. And I feel like we're at this crossroads right now where we can win, and we have to harness all of these opportunities, as sad as some of them might be, to gather all of us together and to start forming a more formidable army. And I came on board, it's a long story how I got involved in wanting to fight pornography, but when I decided I wanted to get involved, I started looking for groups and in America who were engaged in more advocacy work and more education. And I couldn't find anyone. I spent hours and hours and hours looking on the internet, and there was nothing on social media. I couldn't find any groups. Our group, while it was existent, had like this super old website that showed up on like the 6th page of Google. Like no one could find it, and it was only one guy who was still associated in running our organization. Thankfully, it's so different now. Somehow, in the last 6 years, I would say that it was God has prepared so many other leaders to come to the table. And now there are many, many groups who are fighting the fight against pornography, whether it's the advocacy and legal side, or whether it's protecting children, or helping to strengthen marriages, or helping those who are struggling with addiction and the spouses, or those in pornography. And there's this whole wealth of people who have all of a sudden been called to the fight. And it's not only in America, it's all around the country, because as we start to become much more visible online, we're connecting with people. We connected with you here in Trinidad. We've connected with many leaders in Africa, in Australia, in Europe, in South America. There are people being called who are leading the charge. And I would say that we're awash with pornography. Our hypersexualized culture is everywhere you look, but we've turned a corner. And this is proof enough, all of you here gathered today, to start to do something about this issue. We can win. So let me tell you a little bit about some of our strategies, particularly with our organization. We've tried to develop a kind of threefold strategy. One is education, educating people on the harms of pornography. Two is kind of leading the movement and getting other leaders to work together and to find common ground. And the third is advocacy, and trying to change policies that we see as facilitating sexual exploitation. Could you go to the next slide? Oh, look, we have a picture of Bishop Lanos right there from our first summit. So we started this coalition about 7 years ago, and it has evolved quite a lot over the last 7 years to include groups who are focused on, let me start, the pro-family groups in Washington, D.C. got together about 7 years ago, and they said, we need to do something. We're losing this fight against pornography. It's completely destroying families and marriage. We need to do something about it. And at the same time that they were having this discussion and starting to form a coalition, I came on board and got involved with that side, more the pro-family kind of side. But the radical feminists were also getting together and saying, we got to get smarter, we got to collaborate more with others who are working on these issues, and we all found each other. And we decided to put aside all our other issues, all the other kind of social issues that everyone is caring about and that has become political and divided so many of us, and agreed to just work on the issue of pornography and sexual exploitation, and that if we could put everything else aside, we could have considerable progress. And so that's what has happened and been kind of growing over the last 7 years. The pro-family leaders, the radical feminists, the children's advocates, the law enforcement professionals, academics and researchers, medical professionals, pastors and clergy, everyone kind of coming to the table. And we've started hosting an annual summit. We just finished our summit in Houston last week, so I'm quite excited to be here in paradise, resting and not organizing an event. But we try to come together to learn more, to educate all of the leaders on what the research is saying so that we can improve our messaging, to strategize together so that maybe the public might not know that we're all working together behind the scenes, but we are, and there's a really calculated effort there. and to work together on trying to change, on being, protesters and demanding that our laws change and demanding that policies change. And together in a united way, we're able to accomplish so much more. Could you go to the next slide? We also, in the last few years, have had a very deliberate shift in our messaging. And this has happened across the board, those combating pornography in America, and I think it's really spreading out to the rest of the world. We found that nobody wanted to hear about the morality of pornography, the moral arguments, and also few actually want to hear that much about the impact it has on family. But that's what also drives many of us to come together and to fight pornography, is the impact it's having on families. So we're trying to get a little bit smarter. And what we know is that we're awash in sexual exploitation. We're awash with, women and children are being sold on the streets right in broad daylight, and people are turning a blind eye, or they just don't even recognize that it's happening. We have children producing and distributing child pornography. They're sexting and they're posting it on social media, and our pop culture icons are telling them to do this. Right? We have, in America, our jails and our courts are completely overwhelmed with people who are caught with child pornography. And right now there's a commission in Washington, D.C. talking about what to do with the overwhelming problem of people being caught with child porn. And it's very likely that they're going to suggest that we decrease the penalties for those being caught with child pornography. That's crazy, right? The reality, though, is that the people being caught with child pornography today, there are judges, and there are lawyers, and there are doctors, and there are teachers, and they're respectable people. And the United States Justice Department, so there are federal laws in America that prohibit the distribution of hardcore pornography in a whole bunch of places, which I'll talk about tomorrow. But the Justice Department refuses to enforce those laws. And when we got them on the record a couple of years ago about why they won't enforce those laws, they say, well, we're overwhelmed with child pornography. Well, we're overwhelmed with trafficking, and we're trying to fight these things. But I would argue that we can't solve the issue of child pornography and sex trafficking by just fighting child pornography and just fighting sex trafficking. We have to go to the root cause of so much of this. And I posit that pornography is a huge factor contributing to those things growing so much. I'm yelling. So the problem here, at least in America, that we were seeing is that many individuals were feeling called to the fight, to fight sexual exploitation. And many are working to curb domestic and sexual violence. And many are working to curb child exploitation. And many are fighting sex trafficking. But they're kind of all doing it alone. And many of those different areas of exploitation weren't working together and weren't collaborating and weren't getting educated on the other areas of exploitation, when the reality is that there's a seamless connection between all of those. And so our goal also with that coalition and the efforts that we do is to really help people see the seamless connection. And as we are advocating for change, as we talk about the connections between pornography and sex trafficking, people start to listen more, and they start to realize that this is a problem that we can't just push under the rug, and ignore any longer. I often talk about the links between pornography and sex trafficking, and I won't dwell on that, but do you know that pornography is used to advertise for prostituted and trafficked women and children? Prostitution ads online the profits from prostitution ads online, they have surpassed many of the most major corporations, for-profit corporations. People are making tons of money, and they're using pornography to sell these women and children online. Did you know that often the individuals who are being trafficked, those forced sex acts are being filmed and photographed, and then they're being uploaded to the internet and on mainstream porn websites? So you can't even tell if you're looking at hardcore, if you're looking at pornography that's consenting, which I don't believe it's ever really consenting, or you're looking at images of trafficked women who have been uploaded. There's so many connections here. Did you know that many sex buyers talk about how they used pornography and then they decided they wanted to act out what they were viewing, and their wives and girlfriends don't want to do those things, so they're going out to the streets, so they're going online and looking on websites where they can buy people to do those things. There's so many connections, and we have to expose those seamless connections. And as we do so, we're finding very little resistance. We're getting legislation passed. We're getting the media in America to start to cover these issues instead of just joke and mock about it. Because as we connect the dots, it's like everyone's having this aha moment. Can you go to the next slide? Additionally, in the past few years, another shift in our messaging has been to talk about pornography as a public health crisis. I'm not a public health expert, but yet I'm out there all the time talking about the public health impacts, and hardly anyone is saying is questioning that, because the research now is showing that there's serious public health impacts associated with pornography. Also social ills that are associated. But as we talk about the impact to individuals, sexual dysfunctions, and to the family, and to rape and violence and all of these things, people are listening, and suddenly we're getting our message out so much farther and so much more. So I would encourage you to consider some of these messaging tips as you're talking about these issues. Can you go to the next slide? So our organization really works to change policies that we see as facilitating exploitation. We do this in many ways, but one way that's become very successful in the past couple of years is our Dirty Dozen list, which we announce each year. And we pick 12 targets who we see as facilitating sexual exploitation, and we develop big campaigns against them, and we get individuals to call them and send letters and send emails to the top executives and just keep hounding them until they change their policies. And if you could go to the next slide, you can see a couple of the ones. These are the 12 who are on the list this year. I hear some gasps. You're like, how are they on? Well, let me tell you, Snapchat. Many people understand that Snapchat's very popular here, right? Are youth using it? It's an app where you can send text messages to each other that are supposed to disappear in a couple of seconds, but they don't really disappear. And a lot of people who are using this app use it to send sex or nude images to one another. And not everyone who's using the app is using it for that purpose, so I wouldn't say don't let your kids use it necessarily, but be informed about it. But one thing that's happened is Snapchat has found a way to monetize all of the sex that are being sent through the app. And in the last year, they developed a new tool as part of the app called Snap Cash. And what happens is individuals can send each other money directly through the app in America. And what's happening is people are posting on like Instagram or Twitter, and they're posting kind of racy pictures, and they're saying, hey, go find me on Snapchat, and if you give me Snap Cash, then I will send you pornography or more video and stuff. And so Snapchat has monetized this, and almost no one's calling them out on it. Amazon, is Amazon big here? Yeah, okay. So many are surprised when we say that Amazon is very much in the business of sexual exploitation, but they are. They're selling countless books about how to pimp and traffic and buy girls and children. They are selling their Kindle for their e-reader is full of pornography, and it's mixed up with the children's books and in the free books. And so if you're on there, the likelihood of you being exposed to it is pretty high. They're selling hardcore pornography, lots of other ways that Amazon is involved. YouTube, I just got a call a couple weeks ago from a very distraught mother who said that her 10-year-old, she found out he'd been watching pornography, and the way that he found it was through YouTube, because he was watching all these gaming videos, which are very popular among youth, how to win this level and etc. And embedded in those gaming videos was hardcore pornography. And the pornographers, their tactics, they know how to target and get new customers and how to get children hooked, and they're so smart, and that's what they're doing. And the problem with YouTube and Google is we've had many meetings with them, and they refuse to do anything about the hardcore pornography that's on YouTube. They don't want to do anything to hinder people uploading this material. So you can go to our website and learn more about why each of these groups are on there, but if you could go to the next slide. We've had really amazing victories as a result of this, the Dirty Dozen list. American Apparel, for example, they're popular here, are they? Do you know? Okay. Well, they used to have very racy advertisement. It's still kind of racy, but they used to show express nudity, and they would show depictions of sex acts in the ads. And as a result of we just told them they were going to be put on the Dirty Dozen list, and they pulled it all down. Isn't that exciting? Like, before we even actually announced them on the Dirty Dozen list. We got the Department of Defense to make sure that all of our military bases in America and abroad, they're searched regularly now to remove any obscene or explicit content from public and workspaces. And also the U.S. Air Force and the U.S. Army stopped selling pornography on their bases. So that was a great win that we had. We will announce a huge victory in January with Verizon. We had some smaller victories recently, but this year they've taken a major step to help decrease the amount of hardcore pornography that they're selling through their cable services and satellite services. So many things. If you can go to the next, I'll tell you some more of them. The next one. So Google. This was an exciting victory, and I think will continue to go. But we were really upset about YouTube. So we decided to put YouTube on our Dirty Dozen list a few years ago, and then we learned so much more about Google's involvement and how some of their policies were really facilitating exploitation. So we decided to put the whole of Google on our Dirty Dozen list, and they called us in for a meeting, which was really exciting. And we got many leaders from around the movement to come to the meeting with us so we could show a unified voice. And we put together a long laundry list of all the things that they were doing wrong. And they said, we'll try to work on some of it. And as a result, they got rid of, the App Store and the Apple Store. They don't allow any pornographic apps, but Google Play, which is on the Android phones, they were allowing sexually explicit apps in their store. And so they decided to kick them all out, and they're pretty good at enforcing that policy. Google also changed their advertising policy so that now no pornographic ads are allowed to show up on the Google platform, and ads can't even link to pornographic or even a little bit of explicit website. So that's so many individuals have come to us and said, I got hooked because an ad popped up on my screen. So now at least Google's not contributing to that anymore. There's a few other ways. We got them to change their policy on the popular blogging website called Blogger, but the other side was very loud, and then Google rescinded. But, it's this going back and forth kind of effort. If you could go to the next. If we can change Google, we can change anything, right? We can win this fight, even though sometimes it feels like it's going so slow and it's hard. We have virtually completely changed the hotel industry just in the last year and a half. Many hotels in America, Hilton especially, was selling hardcore pornography through their TV services. Almost anytime you would turn on the television in a hotel, there would be 4 options that come up. There's the kids option, and the gaming option, and the movie option, and the porn option. And we had been going after Google for a few years. And last year, because of our coalition, something sparked a huge change. And Hilton executives called us and said that they were receiving 1,000 emails a week, and they wanted it to stop. And we were sending emails to the president and CEO and vice. We got their personal emails. So they wanted it to stop. And we said, we'll ask people to stop if you will meet with us. And so they said yes, and we went to meet with their executives, and we presented many of the things you've heard today about the harms of pornography, the impact on children, the connections to other forms of exploitation, the type of pornography that's available today. It was so racist, so degrading, child-themed, very violent. That kind of stuff Hilton Hotels was making millions of dollars from. And we pointed out how it was incongruent with their policies, where they claimed to care about people and their customers. And so they changed their policy, and by the end of July of this year, they took out all of the pornography around the world. I need to check this hotel to make sure. But that's what they said. And then as a result of Hilton doing that, we went to Hyatt Hotels, and with one phone call, Hyatt Hotels changed their policy as well. And by the end of this year, all hotels around the world will have it removed. And then we went to Intercontinental Hotels Group, and they've changed their policy, and then to Starwood, and they changed their policy. And it doesn't even stop there, because then we found out this year that many of these like porn conferences are being hosted at hotels also, and sex conferences. And it's kind of this long story. I got in a battle with a pornographer in Houston a couple months ago. It was an all-out battle in the media, and it was crazy. But we got Hilton Hotels and IHG Hotel to cancel this big sex conference that was supposed to be in Houston just earlier this year. And as a result, we went back to these hotels and we said, look, you changed your policy, you're getting rid of pornography, but yet you're going to host these events. And so Hyatt and IHG asked us to draft a policy for them so that they will no longer host these events. And they're meeting actually this month, so I hope to say we've gotten them to change, but I'm pretty sure Hyatt and IHG will. But this huge shift in the hotel industry now, rejecting pornography, rejecting sexual exploitation, joining the fight. Many of in the travel industry are working to help combat human trafficking and prostitution on many different levels, and now pointing out how they're connected, and we're seeing tremendous results. And as I said with Verizon, that's a major cable provider in America, and so our next kind of step is trying to change the cable industry and the satellite industry in the United States, and hoping that that kind of cascades also. So victories are possible. Can you go to the next one? I already told you about the military. If you could go to the next one. So we have to stand for what's right, even if it means that we're standing alone. I often feel like I'm alone sitting in my office in D.C. Thankfully, I get to come to conferences like this where I realize that there's so many who are on our side and supporting us, wonderful allies who you've heard from. But sometimes it's so scary. I have stood up and, I hate Cosmopolitan magazine so much. I hate it. I would argue personally that it seems worse to me than some of the hardcore, like Penthouse or Playboy, because it's deceiving women so much. Cosmo, you have Cosmo here, right? Yeah. It's deceiving women so much. It's so pornographic, but women think that it's empowering to them. But the messages within its covers, it's encouraging women to engage and to accept these very violent and risky behaviors and really the porn culture. And many women are being duped and they're accepting. So I really hate Cosmopolitan magazine. And we have Cosmo on our Dirty Dozen list, and we've gotten many of the retailers like grocery store chains and pharmacy chains to put covers in front of Cosmo in America. But whenever I'm at a store, if I'm not with my kids because I don't want to, bring their attention to it, then I go to a manager and I point out that this is degrading and this is pornographic and this is causing all these issues. And some of them, your stores have this policy. Why aren't you enforcing it? And sometimes they laugh at me, right? Sometimes it's embarrassing, and sometimes I feel so stupid. But other times, they change it. I went to Walmart the other day near my house, and a couple months ago it was not covered, and I pointed it out to two managers, and when I went 2 days ago, it was behind blinders. And you never know if sometimes, speaking up, one time at Barnes & Noble, which is do you have Barnes & Noble? Okay. Wow, it's just like we have everything the same. Barnes & Noble sells many pornographic books, child-themed books, really terrible things. And when I first started volunteering with this organization 7 years ago, I said something to the manager at a Barnes & Noble, and he laughed at me, right? And he ridiculed me and mocked me, but there's a crowd that kind of started to gather. This was like one of my first times ever saying something in public, and I felt so stupid. But as I walked out to my car, two ladies came and told me thank you. And they said that they've been feeling the same way, but they thought there was nothing you can do about it. And that's when something shifted in me, is I want people to see that there is something you can do about it. And sometimes we lose, but we're winning too. So we should keep trying. One time I was on an airplane, and there was a man in front of me watching pornography on his iPad. It was like, I can't believe he's in front of me, right? So I said, I have to say something. So I made a big deal about it, and I said something to the flight attendant, who then told me there was nothing he could do about it. And even a woman in front of a couple rows up said I needed to be quiet and no one cared. And it was like the worst 3 hours of my life. I think that the pornography he was viewing was very violent, and it looked like the girls were very young. I can't tell you if they were children, but it was so disturbing. And to have just sit there and no one say anything else, and there were children a couple rows behind, if they stood up in the aisle, they would have seen. I was just like this deep despair. And after I got off the airplane, I made a YouTube video, which I'm embarrassed about because I was so emotional, and I made it just to share with our small group of supporters, but it went viral. And as a result, it was so scary. I got a lot of terrible things happening as a result, threats, and our stuff was hacked, my family was threatened, all this stuff. But every U.S. commercial airline except for American Airlines agreed to change their policy to no longer allow pornography and to better train their flight attendants. And that was just like one little video. So what I want to say to you is, you can make a difference and you can change things. And if you want to start to solve the problem of sexual exploitation, of trafficking, of children hurting children and being hurt themselves, if you want to help protect the family and help fight for love, then you have to add your voice to this fight too. And I'm not saying that you all have to be loud and vocal and yelling and making a big scene on an airplane, but there's so many smaller, quieter things that you can do. Protect your families. Now that you're all here and you're learning about these things, I expect you to talk to your kids, friends, parents. I expect you to talk to people at church and have those difficult conversations and help them see that this is something that we can't ignore anymore. So please just feel energized and energetic, and I hope that you feel like there's a lot we can do and it's not a losing battle. So thank you very much.
I think you all agree with me that Dawn's outlook is refreshing and positive and very, very contagious. I was rereading the notes on your profile, and I also have to say, Dawn, that you possess remarkable powers of persuasion, because there aren't too many people who could get their political directorate to take a bipartisan approach, especially in the U.S., and you did that, so congratulations. My sight isn't great, but I think I recognize His Grace, the Archbishop, who's joined us. I did acknowledge you this morning. And the Apostolic Nuncio also joined us. Thank you so much for being here. Adding distinction and excitement to proceedings. Questions? We've had two remarkable speakers, great presentations, so we're now opening the floor to questions. You can direct to Mrs. Hawkins or to Dr. Hilton. As I indicated, there are two microphones placed strategically. Please go to the microphone and ask your question.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for such an animated and a passionate presentation, Ms. Hawkins. And I see that you have used what I call the C framework, strategic alliance of stakeholders, E, education, and A, you spoke about advocacy. So I call that the C framework. What is the role of life skills development in educating the critical stakeholders that you spoke about?
Yeah, I don't quite understand your question. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm one of the senior life skill tutors in the country. And with life skills development, we look at the intrapersonal development skills of the individual. And I'm asking, how can we use that? Well, I'm proposing that we use life skills development as a way of empowering, equipping, and enabling our stakeholders, parents, students, and teachers, in order to better enable our stakeholders to navigate that path in dealing with pornography and the effects of pornography.
Well, I would say that's so important, and I don't quite follow what the life skills development is, like helping people grow after they've, I'm sorry. Just how to overcome addictions and how to, I'm sorry, I don't quite understand your question, but it seems like quite a, I think Dr.
Let me try a stab. So in other words, I've been involved with these meetings for a number of years, and Dawn has done a remarkable job of pulling together, as has been pointed out, various entities. And for instance, Marianne works with victims, empowering them to change. We have a lot of groups associated with NCOSI that work with helping people that have been involved in trafficking come back. We've had individuals who have worked in the pornography industry come out of the industry, and you can't just you can't just pull the weeds out because it leaves gaps where the plants were. You have to replant the fields, and so life skill development, I think, is essential to help replant the plants where there's gaps where the weeds were pulled. And so I think that's it. And I think Dawn has. I'm just amazed as I go to the meetings like we had in Houston, and how diverse, how many diverse groups have come together to do just that, to help people heal and come back. Marianne, did you have anything else along that line? Life skill development and change.
Is convincing the stakeholders that they already have skills and that they can be brought to bear on these issues, and naming what those skills are, and then showing them how they can use those skills to fight this fight that we're doing. So Dawn has, Dawn has the skill of standing up on an airplane and saying, "Why are you looking at this porn?" And she has brought that skill to bear on this mission. All of you have skills. The parents have skills. The church has skills. The schools have skills. The medical establishment, the mental health establishment. They haven't thought about how to bring those skills to bear on this. And having a coalition, and Dawn's a great coalition builder, she gets people to talk to each other that would not talk to each other. She gets the feminists to sit down with the Catholic priests and say, what do we have in common? And it's like, whoa, that's wonderful. And they do have things in common, and they do find, but then they each bring their own skills to that, and each of those stakeholders have skills that can be used. Part of this is naming those skills, having you recognize what skills you have, and how you can use those skills, whether it's you have the ability to talk to children, whether you have the ability to go into a store and say, why are you selling this? Why are you selling this? Or I think each of you have skills, and each of the stakeholders has skills. It's just refining those and seeing how they can all be used in benefit of this. So that's part of it.
I think it is clear that Dawn's professionalism is really built from her humanity. It's informal, but it's the work of an absolutely caring human being about what happens in and around her, whereas your foundation is, of course, a more formal approach, and I think that's what we're trying to establish here. Any other questions? Yes, we have someone at the mic.
Good afternoon. I am a resource person in the abstinence program in Trinidad and Tobago. The Louisiana folks came and brought their program here in 2004, and the program has fallen out of favor here a bit. But there is a distinct association between sexually transmitted infections and pornography, as was pointed out earlier. My problem is that I am trying to persuade the youth about getting into sexual abstinence in various ways and stuff. But my problem is that I can't seem to involve their parents. I will go into schools with 800 children. I talk to all kinds of groups. But my problem is that I can't seem to get the parents to understand that their children are in danger. And whereas they say, oh, what a wonderful talk, let's get the parents. And out of a school of 800 children, the most I have ever had is 28 parents come to hear the talk. Do you have any suggestions about getting parents involved in this anti-pornography business? Or how can we get parents to understand that the world has become a much more dangerous place for their children? The parents think that by sending their children to good schools, they are doing their best for them, when the better schools almost have the worst pornography in some cases due to cell phones, etc. So we need help to get the parents involved. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I know that some of the other speakers, Clay Olson, will talk a little bit about that and others, but particularly I would say you have to meet people where they are. And parents today, they have no idea what the world is like for their youth growing up. We think we know. I'm only 31, and I thought I know what it's like for my 14-year-old sister right now. And even I'm so far removed from the tech world that they're living in, that I have to really try hard to understand what it is that they're growing up in. And I think in America, I see news article after news article of issues pertaining to this, sexting or some kind of scandal at the school, etc. And I found that when I point that out to the school leaders and to the parents, they often will come to the table. And I think sometimes we just have to change the messaging. So using the word abstinence already scares people away in today's world. And using words like pornography, it scares people away. You guys had the best name of this conference, because just having it, like, you have to meet people where they are and talk about the issues that they're willing to talk about, and when they come, you can help them see the connection, and that's where we've had success.
I also wanted to mention that the de facto number one, by far, educator of our next generation, emerging adults and youth, for sex is porn. It's not anything that the governments, no matter what government it is, provide, social programs, pales in comparison to the power of the education that the 12, 13, 14-year-old boy or girl is finding from porn. Sex is porn. It is teaching them what sex is. It's all porn. And interestingly, porn sex is condom-less sex. They don't wear condoms. In fact, California has tried repeatedly to pass an ordinance to protect performers. The pornography industry has fought it, and recently again fought it back. And in fact, some of the academicians, I'll talk about this in my breakout tomorrow, some of the academicians who are considered pro-porn apologists support, and these are PhDs, people of education, actually support a no condom policy for porn still, trying to say it's safe. Whereas OSHA, in America, which works with occupational safety, has actually come out and asked the pornography industry to follow the guideline, and they refuse. They're the only ones that get to diss OSHA. If a medical office like mine disses OSHA on body fluids, we end up locked up. But but not porn. Porn gets a pass. It always does. Parents don't understand that as much, and the porn industry is fighting back, trying to silence parents. And Fight the New Drug, Clay Olson is going to talk to us tomorrow. He's done so much to educate youth and secondarily parents. Has actually run into school districts where the parents themselves are fighting the concept that porn is all harmful. There are therapists that say we need to teach the positive aspects of porn to our youth. And I would say it's like trying to teach the positive aspects of heroin to our youth. Porn and sex are not contiguous. Sex is wonderful, and morphine can be used wonderfully. Morphine is a powerful drug. It has great uses for humans. So I'm not against drugs, appropriately used. I'm not against sex. But to equate sex and porn is not right either. Heroin does not have a good use. It's a cousin of morphine, but it's a toxic drug. It doesn't have a good use. Porn is toxic sex. That message needs to get to the parents as well.
Can I say something too, just building on that, but also one of the questions earlier that Marianne and Dr. Cooper received, and I think it's the sex ed curriculum in schools is so hard. In America, at least, it's so divisive, and it's this huge war, and even the people on our side are at odds about how to fix it, and I feel like in trying to grow unity in the movement, we just kind of have to steer away from the sex ed fight at the moment, but we can get in other ways. I think particularly schools right now are trying to develop media literacy or digital citizenship tools, and so we can teach healthy intimacy and healthy sexuality and the dangers of online pornography and all these things if we could be clever and sneak in some other ways. And so I'd encourage you, I'm sure you're struggling with these same issues here, and maybe consider the media literacy side of it.
Question?
Thank you. Good day. Ms. Hawkins, I just really have to thank you for your optimism and for your energy, and hopefully it gives encouragement to us locally. I'm hoping that locally we can organize enough to address our carnival culture, which feeds a lot of the behavior, and I'm glad too that it has gone beyond being simply a moral issue where only prudes are concerned about this, to having hard research to back this up, that this is dangerous and these are things to be concerned about. And so I'm hoping that we can organize locally, and not just the 4 days of carnival, but the mentality of carnival that is spreading locally and undermining what we're trying to do. So thank you so much for your energy and your optimism. Dr. Hilton, specifically, and maybe I missed it, with the neuroplasticity of the brain, excuse me, can the brain be rewired or regrown from porn addiction? I got all happy about the virtual reality and wondering, can we use the virtual reality to teach, bring a child back or bring a person back from porn addiction and teach something different? And what can I teach my child? I know some of this comes up tomorrow, but how can I wire my child differently to treat with porn addiction or the possibility?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. So, absolutely, the brain rewires. Remember, in talking about positive neuroplasticity, we talked about multimodal neuroplasticity, how that's used for stroke, for trauma healing. Mindfulness therapy is very commonly used for recovery from trauma models, from addiction models. And just as addiction is a rewiring process, so is recovery from addiction, from betrayal trauma. All of these are essentially neuroplastic processes that require time and healing. How long do they require? We don't have a longitudinal study looking at porn, say like the Kuhn study out of Germany showing longitudinal recovery. It's a new study. But we do have some intriguing studies with other addictions. There's a methamphetamine study where they found the shrinkage similar to what I described with porn. And over about 1.5 to 2 years, those that recovered had return of gray matter to more normal volumes. Dopamine receptors are brain cell receptors that are downgraded with addiction. And it's been found with recovery, these receptors over 1 year to 1.5 years will recover. And so we can't actually pin a longitudinal study specifically on porn. based on our knowledge of other addictions, 1 to 2 years of recovery from any addiction will, I think we have enough evidence and knowledge from other addictions to expect that it will heal. But neuroplasticity is very important, and the learning model for addiction is essential to understand, to really understand what's happening with porn.
Question?
Good afternoon, and all. Thanks for the wonderful, beautiful, very informative presentations that we have had so far. My question point is more to, yes, Dr. Hinton. In terms of music, now, the music that the young people listen to these days, most of the music that is produced is connected with some video presentation, right? And much of it has to do with the derogatory of the female species. I'm wondering sometimes if there's a link with music in terms of patterns, brain patterns, the switch of dopamine in the brain when we listen to music, people and other people, and the music has a link to videos and a link to the derogatory or the basing of women in terms of not only what they see in the video, but also what is said in terms of the B word that they refer to, or the H word that refer to in the music that is so prevalent in our society today. If there's some neurological link as well, or switch, that brings in this whole thing of pornography involved in it. Could you
Yes,
elaborate?
music is actually the language of emotion. And in other words, with music, we can hear a beautiful Mozart. My wife taking me to the airport, we were listening to some Chopin nocturnes. And it was so beautiful on the way. And we were talking about how that literally changes your mood. And it's the same way with arousal, aggressive music, with the MTV kind of music, where you can put that music, that aggressive, more arousal music with sex, with sexually charged themes. Frequently pornography uses aggressive music as well. And so these themes will tend to use that same multimodal neuroplasticity concept I've been talking about of visual, auditory, and emotional input to sculpt and imprint porn more deeply. And so absolutely, this whole issue of using and gaming, for instance, particularly young men, Grand Theft Auto, some of the games have very sexualized themes in addition to the more violent themes. All of that is a multimodal, it's different ways through seeing, through hearing, and through feeling of reaching the same message of aggressive, toxic sexualization of the brain. And also, your question a minute ago asked, what about using VR, virtual reality, for good? At the conference in Houston, they were out of Mexico, weren't they? A group out of Mexico did just that. What they did is they went in with VR filming, and I had never seen VR. This is my first experience with it. They actually had girls that had been trafficked that they were rescuing and talking to, and so these girls were in the place where they got them, and they would describe, this is how I was stolen, this is my life, this is what happens to me. And you're in this virtual reality world, you're about 5 feet away from this girl, she's telling you what's happened to her. And you look around, and you can see through the window, you can see cars outside, you look around, you are there. And you look down at your feet, and it's like you're disembodied, you're standing in the air, you're floating. Because you look and say, well, what am I? And it was a really unique experience. Did you do it, Don? I just was amazed with how much it connected me with what happened to these girls. And it was very powerful, in a good way. And so, yes, it's going to be used, I think, for the dark side, but I think there's a tremendous opportunity for all of us to proactively consider how we can use VR as they have.
Good day. I have one question to Ms. Hawkins. I love your presentation, and I saw myself in your presentation, because I would go to various public places, and there has been a desensitization of our people. We will sit down there in a public place, and on the screen, they would be showing shows, television shows that are inappropriate for children with explicit sexual scenes. And I would go and I will tell them about it. And the following week when I go back, they would come back and I will see them showing the same thing. So how can we form an organization like yours here in Trinidad where we can get parents sensitized, because our society has been desensitized and everyone is sitting down and they are looking at it and they are there with their children, they are very comfortable, and these children, they are taking in everything, and when they go back to the schools, we have to try to teach them the correct thing, and we are fighting a losing battle. So how can we have that here in Trinidad and Tobago?
Well, thank you for that question. I want to say it wasn't, like I said, it was really only in the last 5 years that in the U.S. there's just been this unity that has swelled up together and people are joining one another and speaking up. And so it's not like you can start it now. And one tool I would say that you have on your side, because you don't have an organization yet and you don't have funding, but use the internet. So use social media. There's so many great tools out there for how to set up a petition and how to, you can get the manager's number, and that's what I do. I get the manager and the CEO's email and phone number, and I post it on the internet on a site where I'm telling, and at first, it was just a handful of us who were willing to send those petitions or make those calls, but now it's swelled to where 1,000 people a week were sending Hilton, and that happened over just 5 years, and it's such a low cost at this point if you can utilize social media to kind of help unify. And moms in America, it's like the moms who are running it, who are the ones leading to all of this incredible success, because the moms are angry and they're upset and their kids are being hurt, and so they're joining together and speaking up. But look around you, look how many there are in Trinidad and the islands here who care about these issues, who came together now. So you already are ahead of the game and starting if you guys can just, pick a project to go after this weekend.
Question, yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. I was just thinking of what Dr. Layton would have said in terms of identifying the skills, and everyone has different skills. And I can't remember whose presentation, but the one that showed like the pictures showing A to rest, because I'm always captured by a person's eyes. Because in our society you can see, right? You can see the death, you can see the pain, even when we are laughing culture, but you see the pain in spite of that. And I work with youth who come from, I'm from Grenada, and I work with youth who come from vulnerable and at-risk communities. And I have noticed, I recently started with them, and there are a couple of the guides we've tried in terms of drugs now, and not pornography in particular. But I've seen pictures of them from about 3 years ago, and I look at the guys in front of me now, and you talk about losing their humanness. And I thought that's powerful to be. So I wanted to ask too if it may be possible to use those pictures, because being a small society, it wouldn't be wise to use the pictures of our members, because it would kill the impact you want. But in terms of the question now, how do we reach the parents? And just as you said, you can go into some communities where the parents would say, what about the positive impact of pornography? We know part of reaching the parents in our culture would be their own vulnerability, apart from the other reasons why they may not turn up for a meeting. And I am wondering, as we speak about addiction being, what was the word, disorder? Learning, it's a learning disorder. And we place a high value on education. And we sometimes see why we have now that the boys are underperforming, and underperforming comparing to the girls. with the skills and the talents we have in here, is there any research or any stats possible now to show who is using porn more? Is it boys or girls within that age group? Is it possibly their involvement in pornography? What are the other things that impact in their learning? Can we be using that sort of messaging now, after the proper research, to be able to engage parents, to engage school, and to engage our policy makers? Straight it out.
So those pictures came from the Protection Project, and they're available for anybody to use. And Marianne said she'll share her PowerPoint, but you can also find them online at the Protection Project. And then you asked about research. There's so much research out there, and this kind of goes to the previous young woman's comment too. You shouldn't reinvent the wheel. And many of our groups have already gathered a lot of this research. Fight the New Drugs website has a lot of research together. We have a website called pornharmsresearch.com, all gathered together. And we've tried to come out with, and I will email the diocese here a document that we just put together that has some of the latest a summary of the public health impacts and some of the latest research, so maybe they can send it to all of you. So you don't have to spend all of your time digging in the research because it's already out and it's summarized for you. But particularly I wanted to share, there's this book that is new called Man Interrupted by Philip Zimbardo. It's so good, and it talks about the impact of basically our porn and gaming culture on young men, and it is kind of a meta-analysis of quite a lot of different studies out there that are talking about this. So it's brand new, and it's really a lot of the up-to-date research in one place about the impact on boys and young men that this stuff is having.
All right, I notice we have two people at the microphone, so we'll just take those two questions quickly because we must wrap up. We're running just way behind schedule now, so please go ahead.
Thank you. This question is for Dr. Hilton. In many forms of addiction, the reforming of the brain that you spoke about takes place in the absence of the addictive forming substances. How does this work when the addiction forming material is in the brain at all times, like in porn?
Let's consider cocaine, for instance, which is a drug. How does cocaine work? Cocaine, when a dopamine is this desire chemical in our brain, and what happens is the dopamine goes across what's called the synapse, where it's the end of one brain cell wire where it talks to another brain cell. And you have this dopamine producing, or this dopamine delivering brain cell coming out of the brainstem, which is that desire part of the brain, and it is going all the way up into the connection for the pleasure or the reward center brain cell. And so that's where the action takes place. There's a gap between those. In that gap, dopamine actually is released in little chemical molecules, and it travels across the gap, and it turns on the other cell, the reward cell. It makes it work. It does that by locking into what are called brain receptors, like a lock and key. The way cocaine works is simply on the dopamine. It keeps the dopamine boiling in that synaptic cleft, because after the dopamine does its thing, it actually goes back and is reuptaken back into the cell and reused again. What happens with cocaine is it prevents the reuptake of the cocaine, so it stays in the cleft. So basically cocaine affects the normal brain chemical, or brain drug if you will, dopamine, which the brain makes. So really, if you think about it, cocaine is just changing something that's natural. Now, with a natural behavior like overeating food, which is also a natural addiction, as we call it, and sex, what happens is that dopamine is overused in a similar way. There's not a drug that keeps it in the cleft, but because the stimulus is reportedly and powerfully overused more than is normal for the person in their normal functioning, then the brain overuses the reward. And for instance, a person with food addiction would become extremely obese to the point of their health, but they would not stop. What happens is the dopamine receptors downgrade to protect the brain. That's a sign of addiction. We've seen that with cocaine and other drugs, but we've also seen it now with food addiction as well. And I'm confident we'll see it with porn. There hasn't been a specific study looking at dopamine receptor downgrading with porn, but I think it's inferred with some of the other studies we've seen, like the Cambridge study that came out. So basically, it's the concept of natural addictions to natural behaviors and drug addiction. It's important to understand that they affect those reward pathways and chemicals exactly the same way. And that's why porn can be addictive, because it affects the brain by overusing the dopamine reward system the same way that drugs cause it to be overused. Pardon? The way back? So what happens then is with time, the brain kind of restores, it heals like a cut in your hand, heals, the brain reforms, those dopamine receptors reform, the connections that were important before to other brain cells before addiction are reformed, and the brain wires that strongly drove the person to addictive behaviors become less important over time and less pronounced. So the brain does, think of addiction as leaving what Dr. Lewis called ruts in the brain, or scars. Those are scars of addiction, really, and they do heal with time. They rewire.
Okay. Our last question before the break.
Good afternoon. Zina Ramatali, President of the National PTA of Trinidad and Tobago. Firstly, I would just like to commend the Family Life Commission, for organizing this, I should say, or long overdue national conversation, on the harmful effects of pornography. Now, the National PTA, we have been engaging our members in this conversation, and we started that about a year ago. And we raised something that happened in one of our schools. And I think it received, some negative, media coverage and so on. But my question is, parents, we had a meeting, and our parents said they were very uncomfortable in teaching their children about sex at home. And they said they were more comfortable with it being taught at schools. And on the other hand, the school is saying that it is infused into the curriculum in certain subjects, and that some teachers are not comfortable in teaching the children about sex or about pornography and all these things. So if the teachers are uncomfortable, the parents do not know, and I think Dawn alluded to that the parents really lack the information, to really help their children. What would you suggest to us, or what can be done? And I'm so happy that we have His Grace here today, because, whenever this issue comes up and we raise it in the media, we are heavily criticized, for raising this. So how can we marry the two? Is there would you recommend special training for teachers so that we can engage the parents more? How can we put all of this together? Because at the end of this conversation today, we do not want to go back to our various organizations and just leave it there. We want something to have an impact on our children, an impact in the community, an impact as a whole in Trinidad and Tobago.
Yes, that's great.
Thank you.
This is a much longer question, and it's one that we wrestle with also. And there's quite a few, I think, tips that I would have for you. One, getting into the schools and teaching the kids, like Fight the New Drug, and some other groups around the world have done similar, where they go in and have assemblies to teach the kids, and they often pair that with meetings with the parents, but getting the parents to come to the meetings is the problem. In my experience, I often teach, I often speak to parents, and they're nervous and they're scared and they don't want to have these conversations. My dad had the most awkward conversation with me, right? So what I think that helps is maybe practicing together. Maybe if at your PTA meetings you can try to practice a little bit and give some practical tips. I have a handout which I don't think I sent here, but I can email for all of you. It's like 10 conversation starters, and it tells parents exactly where to start. Like, pick something in the news and just ask your kids about what is in the news so you feel a little bit removed from, putting them on the spot, or having regular family times and asking about their experiences. If you can give parents practical things, exactly what they should do, they'll feel so much more comfortable. But this is all scary, and also it's unknown to them. This is a different world than what they grew up in.
Yeah. I think that, yes, it's uncomfortable, it's a hard discussion, but let me tell you what, the porn industry is not bashful about it at all. And one other thing I want to say briefly about that is the way porn is delivered now has made it essentially accessible to every 12 to 14-year-old boy or girl. In the past, early on, to get to porn on the internet, you had to use a credit card and go through a paywall. Now, there is essentially one company that owns virtually every porn site on the internet. Tomorrow I'll talk about it a little in our public health thing. It's called MindGeek. Has anyone heard of MindGeek? No one. It's one of the largest monopolies in the world. At times, it controls up to 30 to 40% of the bandwidth of the whole internet at night at certain times. And no one even knows who it is. It's a tech company that started buying porn sites a number of years ago. They own Pornhub. They own WikiHub. They own all of these sites, and essentially they pirate material. In the past, if pornographers could get, with the free fare, the free pornography on the internet, if they could get 1 in 200 to pay, they made their money. Because MindGeek is so big, it pirates free fare. Their conversion rate now, and that's the word they use, conversion rate. They want to convert non-payers to payers. 1 in 12,000. If they can get 1 in 12,000 to pay, they make their money. And so what happens then is there's no paywall, so every 12-year-old can get anything free on the internet.
I spoke recently at the Catholic Daughters of the Americas convention, and they have been supporting us for almost our entire 54 years, but they haven't wanted to verbally talk about this stuff. So it was pretty amazing. I got to talk. It was like 1,000 grandmothers who I got to speak to, and I heard them say as they were going into they didn't know I was the speaker, and some people were saying, this doesn't affect me. My grandkids aren't struggling with it. And so I started with my opening remarks was explaining to them what pornography is today. I didn't have to show them, but with what you've heard today, you can explain what pornography is today, because many parents and many, especially grandparents, they don't realize what it is. And once they realize what it is and that their kids are learning about sex from Google, then they want to suddenly start having those conversations. And so maybe that's also a tool that can assist you.
All right, well, Zita, you've again stimulated great debate, and I'm sure this conversation will continue well into the afternoon. I think we all agree that we've had 4 masterful presentations today.